Well met, everyone. I am Rich the Lich, and in today's video, I want to talk to you about why you should be a game master in a game that is not Dungeons and Dragons. This is not a video to simply say you should change course slightly, leave Avernus, leave Out of the Abyss, stop playing in Forgotten Realms and play in Eberron instead. Maybe use one of the Magic the Gathering worlds, Theros, Ravnica. I'm not even talking about going to older editions of D&D, in that you should leave 5th edition and try out 3.0, 3.5. No, I'm talking about leaving Dungeons and Dragons entirely. Now, not forever. Don't fret. Don't be afraid. Just to step away from the Dungeons and Dragons space and become a game master in a different RPG. Here's 3 reasons that I stand by that might be a good reason why you should venture into something else. Now, with these 3 reasons, the first 2 I'm just going to talk about very briefly, and then I will elaborate further on the third. The first reason why it might be valuable, why it might be worth looking into, to switch course, to play a different RPG, is quite simply because you are bored with not just 5th edition, but you're bored with Dungeons and Dragons. Maybe you're bored with fantasy. You're tired of orcs, dragons, and dungeons. Between playing D&D 5th edition or whatever edition you're playing, watching Lord of the Rings, reading books, fantasy, swords, magic, things of that nature. You want something a little more Dresden Files, a little more X-Files or Fringe TV show. You want CSI, crime investigative stuff. You want full-blown hyperspace, warp time, all this craziness. You want just something a little more modern, an Unknown Armies, perhaps a White Wolf, World of Darkness type of thing. You want superheroes. Maybe when you're bored and tired and you're thinking, I don't want to be a DM anymore. I wish someone else would step up. Sure, there's a lot of little details that can go into that. Maybe you're just not enjoying the prep time anymore. Maybe you simply don't have the time and you're feeling guilty, or you're realizing that when you don't have the time to prep because you simply choose to play video games on your off weeks instead, or life is just getting in the way, you know that you're bringing less quality to the table, and that's bothering you. You simply cannot invest the amount of time that you would like to as a dungeon master. If you were to take boredom a lot further, of course you can talk about burnout. But maybe you're not burned out with gaming and tabletop role-playing. Maybe you're just burned out with Dungeons and Dragons. As I said just a moment ago, there's just a barrage of input, all related especially to 5th edition D&D. Official books, D&D Beyond, DM's Guild, the worlds out there, how much Wizards of the Coast is marketing it and pushing it, and TV shows and Critical Role and YouTube channels and my channel and so on and so forth. And you just need to backtrack a little. Yes, there are times where the best fit is to go back a few editions, to play some old school. Get away from all the crunch of Dwarven Forge and fancy miniatures and all of the prep time. Sit back with just a piece of graph paper, a number 2 pencil. Sit among your group of friends and just talk and chat. Maybe that's all you need. You don't need all the little crunch and all the stuff that 5th edition offers where it feels like it's a miniature Warhammer 40K session at the same time that it's D&D. So, one of the reasons why you might want to shift course entirely and play a different game is simply because you're bored or you're burned out. The second reason, you're simply missing out on greatness. You love horror, so you read Stephen King. There's obviously other horror authors out there. Maybe you're missing out on Clive Barker. All you watch is the Marvel movies. Well, then you're missing out on the greatness of Heath Ledger's role as Joker in the DC movies. Change what you're into. Don't just be stuck in the worlds of fantasy. You're missing out on the amount of designers, writers, storytellers, and world builders, and all they do is non-D&D stuff, so you're simply missing out. There's some wondrous writing in Call of Cthulhu 7th edition, amazing writing in Unknown Armies. There's an amazing vibe and aesthetic to the original World of Darkness stuff. Just read a lot of these stories, and you're missing out by adhering to whatever is the sort of 800-pound gorilla in tabletop role-playing, which is D&D. So venture forth, spread your wings, because you're missing out on greatness. Finally, the third one, which I'll elaborate on further, by venturing into other tabletop role-playing games, by playing other ones, it enables you to build a visual library, to build narrative complexity and narrative variety, through a means where I like to say it's how to assign traits from one RPG and tack it onto Dungeons and Dragons. See, I mentioned in the beginning that you don't have to leave D&D forever. Especially if you think the burnout is specific to the game or the system, and you don't want to just leave your friends and you don't want to just get into a new hobby. You want a tabletop roleplay. You might just be burned out with D&D, so take a break. Step away from the game. It's not enough to just take an hour break or cancel next weekend session and then do it again the following week. Sometimes you need to step away for 6 months and stop playing it. And maybe in playing another tabletop RPG, you'll realize, yeah, this one was kind of fun, but you know what? It highlighted to me why D&D is so damn good. Let's go back to D&D. Absence makes the heart grow fonder, they say, right? But when you step away from D&D entirely, and then you come back to it, you may have some elements from the other RPG that you were playing, whatever it may be. Whether it's modern, whether it's complete opposite end of the spectrum and it's sci-fi or Star Wars-esque or cyberpunk, whatever it may be. Maybe it's just another fantasy game with a grittier rule set or whatever it may be. You can have various traits and things you can pick and pull from and then attach it to your D&D games, and it's going to create a better visual library and more narrative complexity and variety. Here's the example that I said I would elaborate on. I have very fond memories of World of Darkness. Now, don't hold a lot of this lingo and name-dropping to me. I have not looked at any White Wolf World of Darkness book or played in that world for over a decade. So my memory is a bit loose with it, but I do remember having very fond memories as a player. I've never run World of Darkness for more than a session or two, but I played in quite a bit of it. But here's a little scenario based on some of the experiences we've had. You're meeting with some vampire lord, okay? And I'm talking more a monster, right? More 30 Days of Night vampire, not Twilight. He's the head of a power base in your city. Controls a massive guild. All of the gangs in this one neighborhood all eventually funnel to him. A mafia leader, if you will. A boss. And you have to meet with this thing. This vampire lord. And the reason why is word on the street is your name, you're being incriminated, right? Your name is being lumped in with a bunch of other groups as possibly drawing the ire of that vampire lord. Now, mistakenly, you never interacted with the vampire lord, you never stepped on his toes or got into his territory, but you need to clear your name because rumors are this vampire lord has you on his hit list. And if you don't fix this, within a day or two, you're going to have a monkey on your back that you're not going to be able to get rid of. So what you as a group have decided to do is confront the vampire lord. Obviously not with any sort of hostile intentions, not posturing up, because you're way out of your league here. We're talking you're level 3, and that's a CR20 vampire lord. But you're going to parlay, you're going to clear up the miscommunication, and hopefully sort of, what's the word? Assuage? Ease the tension and prove, through alibi or whatever, that you never meant, sorry, Mr. Vampire Lord, sir, ma'am, we did not mean to step on your toes. How can we fix this? We are not the ones you're looking for. Perhaps we can even help you find the ones you're looking for to help clear our name. But please, kindly, if you would, we're asking you respectfully, while you're dropped down to one knee, please stop hunting for us. We are not the guys you're after. And what you're going to do is you're going to head into this corporate building, a very large skyscraper, right? 20, 30 feet tall. Now notice, we're playing in World of Darkness, a little more modern time. Yes, there's vampires and the stuff from the underworld movies and things like this, but it's a very different genre, time period, and vibe than Dungeons & Dragons, right? But stay with me here. You go into an elevator, you and your group. You head up 25 floors, all the way to the top. Ding! The doors open up, and you can see what looks like a real fancy industrial sort of office section, right? You're near at the top floor, like where the penthouse would be. And you hear that the vampire lord resides up there he also he works and lives in the same sort of building. and you're up at the top, and you see a lot of very cold industrial, right? A lot of metal doors, metal desks, sharp edges, very cold, very modern architecture, okay? Glass, but of course it's perfectly stained enough that it would not conveniently allow sunlight through. And right in front of you, as you get off the elevator, are two gigantic humans, I guess? Massive. We're talking Arnold and Conan, right? Bodybuilder-esque. 5% body fat, 6'2", 260 pounds. Just jacked. They're wearing black tank tops, so the muscles are just bulging out of it. Massive deltoids, traps that connect to their ears, just huge, hulking individuals. They're wearing slacks, really nice gold buckled belts, and dress shoes, right? So they look prim and proper. They look the part as some sort of high society, but there's an obvious air of thuggery surrounding them. And you notice they have very hairy arms. And you have heard that this vampire lord, you're not sure the details of to what went down here. But from what you have heard is this vampire lord has underlings that are werewolves. And my memory is not, is a bit hazy here because it's been, as I said, over a decade. Vampires, which is what you all are in the group, right? Just much lower level. You're supposed to be meeting sort of an ancient vampire. Vampires do not mess with werewolves. If damage, like a vampire gets stabbed, even if you get shot, right? You take general damage, the things that would kill humans. Because you're a vampire, you can, whether you go into something like torpor or whatever, or you go into some sort of regenerative state, like they did in Lost Boys, you can take damage as a vampire, you'll recover from it. Werewolf damage is something I think called ag damage, right? The Geru or whatever they're called. When they claw you, when they chew on you, werewolf damage is lethal damage. It kills vampires. Werewolf damaging a vampire is like a vampire damaging a human. You were told, there's rumors that this vampire lord has as his sort of main bodyguard, werewolves. You don't want to mess with those guys at the door. So the point of all of this is you quickly realize that you are way out of your league. The vampire lord, the guards, okay? So we already know, we're establishing that this is a system and a situation where combat is not your best option. Stop looking at your character sheet. Let's just talk. Game master to players, and let's figure out how we want to do this. You're already on the bad side, right? Because apparently your name is lumped in with those that are causing this vampire lord some issues, right? But these werewolf guard, they're in human form, but they have the ability to also, they don't need a full moon. They can change at will. If they hulk out and go full werewolf, you're screwed. Done. Let's make new characters. But they kind of seem to know that you are there to see the Lord. They also don't think you're a threat. So they open the door and they usher you in. And what you see in front of you is a very opposite to the cold modern architecture that is of the main office floor that you arrived on. You're going into like this vampire lord's personal quarters, almost like a lawyer's office. A very high-backed leather chair, red wood, like cherry wood, oak, just natural materials. It's kind of an oval office. The whole back wall is just shelves, bookcases, just all the way. And it has that ladder, that you can slide across to work your way all the way up to the top shelves. Now, on those shelves are books that scream age and antiquity. Like the books that Gandalf was poring through when he was investigating the details of the One Ring to verify if that was it. The book similar to what Pippin dropped in the well in Moria. Just these old creaking tomes, leather-bound, huge, thick, dusty. Pages and parchment and scrolls tucked in. Maybe some of them even printed on skin. Just age and old. And then scattered throughout the office, tapestries and paintings and the rug that is underneath the desk where the vampire lord is sitting. These busts and statues on these pedestals. Almost looks like he just ripped pieces of ancient Greece from that time period and set him down in his modern time, giving you an immediate feeling that this guy is really, really old. Like, he didn't just buy replicas of this stuff. He was around when the Renaissance artists painted these things. And he has them in his office now. And he turns to face you, and exactly as, reputation precedes him, this guy looks like a mouth of just teeth and gnash and red feral eyes. He looks, like he's partially, if you ever saw the original American Werewolf in London, I think, we're talking like 1970, late 70s or something, which is still some of the best visual effects, even better than CGI. Imagine he gets stuck in partial change mode. So there's a bit of jutting. And you're not sure if this guy is like werewolf, whatever he is. He's a monster and he looks it. But there's a level of sophistication and intelligence. He's got tattoos that almost form these runes that encircle his arms. I'm going to leave that little situation right there. See, there's no part there, if you're playing werewolf, or white wolf, I should say, World of Darkness, there's no part where you're thinking fight, fight, fight. But how often do you think that in 5th edition D&D? All the time. It's the best way to handle situations. It's what your character is generally going to be best at. If not, you're not really giving much to the game. It's what the system is designed around. Combat. But when you play in another game, in another system, another world, and you venture into, it doesn't have to be White Wolf or vampires, but something like that example, you play in that. And the fact that I even have that memory, now if I transfer that over to D&D, notice how much more variety and complexity I can bring to my stories, and how my visual library has been built by something that might seem unrelated. And now my D&D players are supposed to be talking to, or they hear about an orc chieftain. It fits, right? Orcs. But what is often the first thing that clicks when you think orc chieftain? I'm going to look in the monster manual and see what's more powerful than a regular CR1 or CR1 orc. Which orcs can I look through in D&D Beyond that show me, that represent an orc chieftain? Or how can I level up the orc chieftain and give him some barbarian template? But notice what you're doing. You're thinking of, how would I fight the orc chieftain? What would his stats be to prove to my players that you shouldn't fight this thing? Or if you do, now we're going to put miniatures on the table. Here's what you're fighting against. But notice where my mindset goes. It didn't go there in World of Darkness because the system and the RPG doesn't force that. It doesn't feel as efficient to go about it that way. But by playing in that non-combat heavy system, yes, combat is exciting and combat can be fun as a vampire. But you just need to know there may be some sessions where we shouldn't be doing any fighting, guys. We need to do a lot more talking. If you transfer that in, this orc chieftain is now the vampire lord. Your players climb Ewok style, right? Ewok village, like this treehouse up 20 stories. Notice where that came from. When they arrive at the top floor, I think it was in Darnassus, one of the starting areas for Night Elves in World of Warcraft. You circled the tree, just like when the Fellowship was going up to meet Galadriel. Right? What was the guy? Where is Gandalf? I'd very much like to see him. That guy, right? They're working their way up. And you get up there, and as soon as you arrive before the entrance to this orc chieftain's abode, there's 2 elves. Just like the werewolves were with the vampire. Unlikely allies, aren't they? How many questions come up from... Whoa, hold on. Why are the elves guarding this guy? What's the relationship here? And these 2 elves look like, they are legendary bladesmiths. Blade masters. You don't want to mess with these guys, right? It's Legolas 1 and 2. And you believe that there's probably more elves with bows trained on you right now. But they know you're coming. They let you in. And you see an orc. Tribal tattoos. Possibly has shaman magic. But you notice there's a painting or some stonework that his desk is made of, that his table is made of. And it's like, that stone only comes from this kingdom. like the spoils of war, you can tell this orc, whatever group of tribe or army he leads, he's conquered things. And he's taken bits and pieces from each culture, and he keeps them in his chamber. This guy's a badass. And you need to clear your name with him. See, you've gone a different direction narratively. You've gone a direction that seems like you have to really put a lot of time and energy and effort into going in 5th edition D&D, because 5th edition oftentimes wants to lean you right into what are the stats? What's the CR? What's the challenge rating? Is this a random encounter, or is this more just in between time that we need to get some details to eventually get to the encounter? See, but when you play other games, you build a better visual library. And when you just replace the Vampire Lord, the modern boss, the Mafia boss, with Orc, when you have your dragon encounters equal to an encounter with Queen Amidala, right? A Star Wars, a sci-fi thing. This is the lady who owns, an Inquisitor in Warhammer 40k, let's say, in Deathwatch, right? Don't mess with the Inquisitor at all. You know what? I mean, the resources this guy has, he can put you away. He can just have you outright killed, but he will ruin your day. Basically, the game master would say, just make a new character, you're screwed. You don't mess with an Inquisitor. Not only does he probably have a cadre of Space Marines guarding him, but you don't mess with the Inquisitor. So when you're playing a game like that, right? And I understand Deathwatch can be very combat heavy, but when you're playing a game like Dark Heresy, and there's a lot of socio-political intrigue and worldly ramifications to you starting shit, the game fosters that. But how you play, when you play in that world, and how you handle the Inquisitor is how you might be able to handle the 5th edition dragon, so that it doesn't just become what's its breath weapon and what are its elements of damage. A dragon needs to be more than that. And one of the best ways to create more in your 5th edition space, to create more variety in your NPCs, more variety in your stories, in your adventures, more meat to chew on and digest in your cities and your kingdoms, is by playing other RPGs. RPGs that are focused on story and narrative, and just sitting back and just enjoying the interaction between players and not worrying about what dice you're rolling. That's probably the number one reason why you might want to venture into another RPG. And then if you combine it where you're burned out and bored with 5th edition or D&D, do these things, venture into another game, and when you come back to D&D, you might be pleasantly surprised at how much it feels like the game has opened up to you a lot more. Now, to end this video, I can't tell you what the other RPGs you should get into are. I would tell you what I would play. I would play at any moment. If my players wanted to play it, I would play Unknown Armies. People have been asking me about this game, so maybe I'll make a video on it. I would definitely play White Wolf again. I've always wanted to run my group through World of Darkness stuff. And I would play Slay. It's just a simpler game. It's just a lot of fun for me. I enjoy it. And I would play Warhammer Fantasy. I'll put it on screen, I think, a picture of it. I think it's 2nd edition. That's about all I would really play right now. I would probably look into some of the older editions of D&D just to see. But I feel like 5th is... If I'm going to play D&D, I'm probably just going to stick with what everybody's more familiar with and what is being pushed and everyone has access and resources to. So that's it. What I would love for all of you to do, if you've watched the video this far and I've missed some RPGs, or which are your favorite RPGs outside of D&D, put in the comments for other players, for other readers, other DMs, potential game masters, that they should look into. What RPGs are out there that all game masters, all dungeon masters should look into running and or playing in? What's your hot list? That's all I have for you guys. I'll see you soon.